It's 3 a.m. Brand new paramedics on their third ever real call. Turns out it's a 68-year-old male with dizziness, nausea, and just not quite feeling okay. 12 lead, pretty inconclusive. Vitals are borderline, systolic BP of 102, heart rate's 94, patient's a little bit sweaty. The pneumatic freezes. Why? Because the patient doesn't present like any of the 10 neat chest pain scenarios that they memorized from the textbook. This isn't a STEMI. It isn't a classic aortic dissection. It isn't a PE. It's just messy. What went wrong here? Was it the medic? Or was it the education that prepared them? We've all seen providers who can recite a protocol verbatim but can't manage a patient who doesn't fit neatly into a box. The problem isn't the student. The problem is how we teach.
Attention all units, the air is being held for emergency traffic only.
This is the Pre-Hospital Pulse Podcast. The podcast that delivers high-yield EMS education and real-world opinions you won't find in a textbook. We're here to dissect complex clinical concepts, challenge the dogma, and explore what it really means to think beyond the protocols. The views, opinions, and discussions on the Pre-Hospital Pulse podcast are for informational and educational purposes only. They represent the perspectives of the host and the guest and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any employer, agency, or regulatory body. This podcast is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The clinical concepts and debates presented are designed for trained EMS professionals to challenge dogma and explore the why behind the medicine. All listeners are responsible for adhering to their local protocols, scope of practice, and direct medical control. Always exercise your best clinical judgment in the care of your patient. Welcome to the Pre-Hospital Pulse Podcast, and I'm your host, Corey. Today we're going beyond the protocols, but not on a clinical topic. We're going to talk about something that defines the future of our entire profession, EMS education. Today we're going to tackle a pretty large dilemma. Why do so many highly experienced, salty providers, the ones that we all look up to, or the ones that we have at one point looked up to, the ones with 20 years of experience on the truck, struggle to be effective instructors? Today we're going to challenge the dogma that field experience is the only thing you need to be a good teacher. We're going to argue that the art of teaching is a completely separate skill, and our failure to recognize that is holding our students back. For all the educators and aspiring educators listening, this episode is for you. My promise to you is that by the end, you'll have actionable, evidence-based tools to move beyond cookbook teaching and start forging true critical thinkers. So what's the first dilemma? It's that most of us are teaching adult learners using the exact same methods that we experienced in grade school. Think about it. We set them down in the classroom, we stand at the front of that classroom, and we talk at those students for 8 hours. This is a model called pedagogy, which is, by definition, the art and science of teaching children. It's a top-down, listen and repeat model, and it fundamentally fails when it comes to EMS. Our students are not children, but adults. We need to be using andragogy, which is a set of principles for teaching adults. A guy named Malcolm Knowles defined these back in the 1970s, and they're pretty critical for being successful in teaching adults. Research shows that adults are different. They learn different than children. First of all, adults are self-directed. They need autonomy, not just orders. They need to be part of the learning process. Second, they bring experience. They're not blank slates. They filter every new piece of information they obtain through their own life experiences. Third, they're problem-centered. This is a big one. They don't want to learn about cardiology. They want to learn how to fix chest pain. They learn best when new information solves a real-world problem. And finally, they need relevance. An adult learner must know why they are learning something. And this is where the because I said so method fails as an EMS instructor. It's where the this is just how we do it, or it's in the protocol, just memorize it. These instructors that use these methods, they lose their class. That dogmatic approach does not create respect, it actually creates resentment. It directly conflicts with an adult's fundamental need to know why, and it shuts down the learning process before that process ever really begins. We have to respect them as adult learners first before we can teach them anything about EMS. So, what is our central debate for this episode? Well, we have this assumption in EMS that the best clinicians automatically make the best teachers. The real world truth? Most of the time, it's the exact opposite. So, what's the argument for using this method where we take those top clinicians and turn them into instructors? Well, it's pretty easy to understand. The salty provider says, I've seen it all. I've got 20 years of experience, and those 20 years of experience are just what the student needs. Those students need to be tough. They need to see the real world, and they need to just do what I do to be successful. The reality? The problem is that an expert's brain works on shortcuts. We call them illness scripts or pattern recognition. After 20 years, you don't run a checklist for chest pain. You walk in the door, you look at the patient, and you just know. You know that that patient is sick. A new paramedic or a novice EMS student just can't do that yet. Student's brain doesn't have those scripts to work off of. They need the slow, deliberate, step-by-step process. They need to build the differential from the ground up. This is where the conflict happens. The expert instructor gets frustrated because the student just can't see it. And the students get frustrated because the expert just can't explain how they see it. Being a great provider is not the same as being a great educator. They're two different skill sets. Your field experience is your content, but teaching is your craft. This is why organizations like NIMSE, the National Association of EMS Educators, are so important. They exist to give providers the Instructor 101 tools to bridge this exact gap. It's about learning to be a preceptor who, and I love this thought process, is willing to let them fail. There's a great article from GEMS with that exact title. And it's not about letting them harm a patient. Obviously, that would be a bad thing to do. But it's about letting them make safe mistakes in a scenario or even on a real call without you just jumping in and taking over. It's about letting them work through the problem, hit a dead end, and then debriefing it. That's where the real learning happens. Not from you doing it for them. So if this old model is broken, what's the fix? How do we change this process so that it is more beneficial to our students? You have to teach your students critical thinking, not just memorization. And you do that by ditching the lecture and embracing the problem. Let me give you a case study. 2 ways to teach a class on chest pain. Method 1. This is the old school way. You'd put up a 45-minute PowerPoint. You'd list about 10 different diagnostic differentials, You'd show about 5 different examples of a 12 lead that shows a STEMI. You'd list out the protocol steps: oxygen, nitroglycerin, aspirin, 12 lead, transmit the 12 lead to the destination. If you're lucky, your student sticks with you for about 10 minutes and then their brain checks out. They've memorized the steps, but they haven't learned how to think. What happens to the student when they encounter the chest pain patient whose blood pressure is 90 and they can't give nitroglycerin? Or what happens when they have a chest pain patient and that 12 lead is inconclusive? Now, method 2. This is problem-based learning. This is what I consider to be the quality educator's way. You walk to the front of the class and say, okay, you walk in, you have a 55-year-old male clutching his chest. He's pale, he's sweaty, go. And then you shut up. You facilitate the discussion in the scenario. You force them to ask the questions. What are the vitals? What does the 12 lead look like? What's the patient's history? You force them to build their own differential. You use a technique called scaffolding. You don't give them the answer, you give them just the next little piece. You support them as they build the case, piece by piece, just like a real call. This problem-based approach is proven by research to be more effective. It teaches the process of thinking, not just the facts to memorize. It develops the different levels of critical thinking. It moves them past basic recall and into complex application and evaluation. And most importantly, it mimics the real world. No patient hands you a PowerPoint of their symptoms. They give you a messy, complex problem to solve. The dilemma for every instructor, every preceptor, every field training officer is clear. Are we going to keep teaching the way that we were taught, or are we going to evolve? We have to ditch the because I said so dogma. You have to respect your students as adult learners by explaining the why and make your content problem focused. A great medic does not necessarily equal a great instructor. Being a good teacher is a separate learned skill. Your experience is your content, but teaching is a craft. Seek out formal instructor training. You have to facilitate, not just lecture. Your goal is to create critical thinkers, not protocol followers. You must use case studies, high-fidelity simulations, and problem-based learning to force your students to think, not just to memorize. At the end of the day, our job as instructors isn't to create clones of ourselves. It's to create providers who are better than we are. Providers who can critically think and adapt in that 3 a.m. chaos long after we've left the classroom. That is our real world mission. If you're an educator who's ever felt this dilemma, or a student who's experienced it, I want to hear from you. Find us on Instagram at Pre-Hospital Pulse or on YouTube. The link is in the show notes. Leave us a comment. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on Spotify. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube. It's the single best way that you can help other providers find the show. This is Corey with the Pre-Hospital Pulse podcast. Until next time, stay safe and keep thinking beyond the protocols.